Good morning, everybody. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this camera fixed. This is so frustrating. I have a brand new computer and I can't seem to get the camera right, so everybody ends up looking at the ceiling. Anyway, I don't know, maybe I should just stop using this thing. Okay. What is with this thing? I wish somebody could explain to me how to edit a camera on one of these. This is so pathetic. Here I am, an adult male, trying to figure out how to use the camera on a brand new laptop. So, some of the topics that I wanted to cover today. This laptop is so frustrating. I just want to throw it against a wall. Some of the topics that I wanted to cover today include the market for Mercedes and Bring a Trailer, especially the 123 Market. And I also wanted to discuss the car wizard purchasing a 123 and then a 123 parts car. And so this all ties into the 123 market. So first things first, I'm starting to see a lot of Bring a Trailer cars that were sold, for typical Bring a Trailer prices. In this case, a 560 SEC, a 450 SE. Somebody messaged me with a 190 E16 valve who just bought one on Bring a Trailer. And I'm starting to see this common trend among Mercedes that are sold in Bring a Trailer where they sell for an over the top price, but the cars need a average amount of work. And so, like if you buy like a car with a 117 engine on BAT, you might get lucky enough to where the car doesn't need a timing chain or something major like that. But I haven't seen any really truly great cars sell for what I call the mid-range price bracket, like the $7,000 to $20,000 price bracket. And oftentimes, I think one of the issues with Bring a Trailer is that seller involvement is optional. I think they should make seller involvement mandatory, where if you're a serious bidder, you should be able to contact the seller and go on FaceTime with them or something so that you could actually inspect the vehicle. One of the real problems with buying a car and Bring a Trailer is the seller's narrative and the condition of the car never line up, often because the sellers deliberately ignore, obfuscate, or straight up lie about the operating condition of the vehicle. And this is a really typical problem with auctions, but I think even more so with BAT, because BAT acts like they try to filter every single car and bring only the best cars to market. Now, there's no way to actually improve the quality of the cars, regardless of whether they're on Bring a Trailer or not. The big problem that we see is that most people, most shops, most mechanics, most individuals are thoroughly incapable of affordably sorting out a classic Mercedes on a budget where they can make a profit on the car. And so part of the problem, of course, is the expectations of the buying public. I think that the peanut gallery on Bring a Trailer, especially people that have nothing to do but comment on that site day in and day out, are actually really poor evaluators of the cars, because they put pressure on the sellers sometimes to lie about the goodness of their vehicles. They'll say, oh, how does the engine sound? Or, oh, can you zoom in on those paint chips? Whereas they're not really asking important questions. And so the sellers, of course, pay more attention to like the cosmetics and, of course, the presentation of the car. I think some of the peanut gallery fail to say, hey, can you show me those rotten lower ball joints? Or can you show me why the shifter has extra play in it? Or can you show me the number of the number of scored cam lobes in the engine, please? And of course, nobody does that. When was the last time you got to see under the valve covers on a Bring a Trailer car? Probably never. I can't tell you guys enough times how I've seen cars from BAT come into my shop with items that weren't even really addressed. For example, if you buy a car that's from Florida or in the Southeast and Bring a Trailer, there's probably going to be some rust that the seller has deliberately not photographed or overlooked or hasn't even looked for. And that's a really big problem when you get a car and you find out that it needs $2,000 to $3,000 of rust repair, maybe a windshield pulled. It doesn't mean that the whole car should be scrapped. It just means that the seller should be more honest. If Bring a Trailer sellers are more honest and evaluated their car more honestly, here's what we would see. We would see a downward shift in prices, which looks bad for Bring a Trailer and really frustrates sellers. Bring a Trailer tries to moderate prices by keeping the reserve low, but I don't think that this practice is a good practice. Their practice actually needs to be to get a couple of mark experts for each car on hand that do a better job evaluating the cars, so that they can tell a seller that tries to lie about and misrepresent their car a lower price and a lower reserve price. Whereas if you have a seller that brings a really honest, straight, decent car to auction, those sellers should be given a more fair reserve. I noticed that BAT tries to beat everybody up on reserve because they want to sort of be able to say, oh, well, we assign the car a fair market reserve, which really isn't true. If you're buying a car and Bring a Trailer, I can't emphasize the importance of getting in touch with the seller and making a list of all the problematic areas in a car and making note of whether those things actually work on the car or not. I find that so many sellers will beat around the bush when you start asking tough questions. So here's an example. 78240D that I was helping one of my subscribers evaluate, that was for sale, not on Bring a Trailer, but on eBay. I got in touch with the seller, and the seller, instead of like actually talking to me, he sent one of his technicians to look at the car with me on I think it was on Google Duo. And what we ended up doing was going over the entire car. And so I learned a lot of stuff about the car that I didn't know before. For example, all the windshield gaskets are cracking. While it doesn't make the car a bad car, spending $250 in windshield gaskets from Mercedes, plus like the 12 hours of labor to do the job right for both the front and rear windshield, is a big ask. If you're seriously considering a really expensive car and Bring a Trailer, like a 111 cab or a 113, it is even better if you do a couple of these sessions with the seller. Instead of just doing one, you should do 2 or 3, because oftentimes When we do the first one, we end up with more questions and answers. And you think about it, you go back and ask the seller your next set of questions. I think by the third time around, any questions should be answered. I find that buying a car is sort of like building a friendship with another person. It takes a long time. You can't just become fast friends with an individual. There are going to be some surprises. I think it's the same thing with buying a car. Now, some people don't mind the surprises, but for the most part, most people have a very low pain tolerance when it comes to buying a classic car. I personally don't. I don't have a low pain tolerance at all. I don't get angry or upset or frustrated. I used to, but I realize that there's really nothing I can do about it except spend money. So I try to compensate by buying cars that are unadvertised, cars that nobody really looks for. I try to compensate for for the car's needs and what I think is a good deal. I remember when I bought my 5-liter SLC and I dragged it out of a building here in Merritt Island. The car needed just about everything except a paint job and a bunch of rust repair, and that was good enough for me. I bought the car at a price that made sense. The problem with Bring a Trailer is when you have an informed person trying to buy a car that they genuinely want and appreciate, you're bidding against a bunch of uninformed people. Now, there are some really great cars that have sold in Bring a Trailer. I can't say that every car that sells in there is a dud. For example, a really great car that sold on there last week was a dark red 280 SE 3.5 coupe. The car had been loved and well cared for its whole life, and it sold for $125,000, which is about what a really good 3.5 coupe should bring. So this wasn't a fluke or anything like that. It was just a really great car with really great running and driving characteristics that I think deserved the money it brought. But really the danger is in the lower end of the market. So if you have $125,000 to spend in a car, great. But most of us, when we're shopping for a classic car, are looking to spend under $15,000 and sometimes under $10,000. And this is the area where I think that Bring a Trailer buyers really get turned over and shaken, because they're relying completely on the narrative that the Bring a Trailer auction team writes about a car, and they themselves don't know enough to actually generate an honest and totally realistic narrative about a vehicle. This is something that Bring a Trailer needs to work on, and hopefully with their new owners, Hearst Media, this will get better. But I don't know. I've heard that Bring a Trailer may or will likely still be run by the same team of people that owned it beforehand. So I don't know if this will change. I know that they have a lot of cars to list on there, and they try to do a great job. And it's very hard when you only have so many people working on your platform. You can only do this so many times per week. Eventually you run out of days and hours and software and file space and et cetera, et cetera. So those are my observations of Bring a Trailer so far. I don't see things necessarily getting any better. Just if you're considering a car on there, you need to evaluate the car more thoroughly than Bring a Trailer does. That's my 2 cents. The next item I wanted to talk about was the 123 Market. So I've been getting an overwhelmingly high number of requests for 123 turbo sedans. This is really interesting because I don't see a lot of, 2 years ago, I didn't see a lot of inquiry about 123 turbo diesel sedans. Now I'm seeing at least 1 or 2 inquiries per week, which is a good sign. I've never been a fan of I've never been a big follower of market trends. But in this case, I sort of found myself stuck in a trend. And I don't know if something that I'm doing is feeding it. Probably not. I'd like to think that the cars stand on their own 2 feet because they're really great cars. If you're looking at a 123 sedan, though, there's some advice that I want to give you. And so the first word of advice is don't focus so much on year and color. I know that the 85s are a lot better. If you can get an 85, it's a bonus. Also, quit focusing on colors. A lot of the cars that are left out there that are not stupid money, that are in really great shape, are colors people don't like, particularly gold, ivory, white. I mean, those are all fine colors in my opinion, but a lot of people seem to really dislike them, especially the champagne metallic color. And I don't I don't particularly think that champagne is a great color or a bad color. I think it's a color that suits the car well. My own 300D is champagne metallic. I think that people are way too picky though because they feel that they have to have a connection with the vehicle's color. Color is the worst determining factor ever. Even though I ask people what color they would like, this is kind of a trick question because I want to see when I ask someone what color they like, I want to see if they actually appreciate the car for what it is or if they're buying it to sort of feed some kind of weird childhood dream they've had about owning a 123. Owning a 123 is not, well, it's okay to have the dream of owning one of these cars, and I think it's a good thing. You have to realize that these cars are not like Ferraris or Porsches. They're not dreamy, sexy cars. They're about being well built and a properly constructed automobile. There's not supposed to be anything necessarily sexy about them unless you consider, the angularity of a 123 to be visually appealing or aesthetically appealing, which, I do. I admit that there were also some more attractive Mercedes made, but the 123 from a design standpoint is not supposed to necessarily make your heart stop beating. It's supposed to make you look at the car and say, wow, this car is extremely well designed. There's purpose built into this design. You can't argue with this design and say, oh, they shouldn't have done that or they shouldn't have done this. Every aspect of the car's design is perfect, even if it's not a total heartthrob from every angle. The big problem with buying a car based on factors like color or model year is that somebody might be misinformed about these things, or they might miss out on a really functionally great car because they had to have a certain visual appeal. And visual appeal is a trap that many of us get. We get led down the trap of visual appeal because we don't know or we don't have enough information to appreciate a vehicle for what it is. Now, let's go back to the 123 market. If you're looking for a 123, the first question you need to ask yourself is, which model do I want? Do I want a European gas car? Do I want a 240D? Do I want a Gen 1 123 because I like, I don't know, the clear fog lights or the early style seats or the pebbly dashboard? Or do I want a later 123 because I like the more durable interior and I like some of the improvements? There are valid reasons to want a 300D non-turbo versus a 300D turbo. Some people like the simplicity of the non-turbo engines. There's a valid reason to want a 240D because you want the simplest car possible. There's a valid reason to want a 300D because you live in an area where you need turbo power to be able to accelerate onto a freeway ramp or to keep up with traffic. There are valid reasons to want a gas 123 because you like the way that the M110 engine or M115 engine feels. I mean, one of the coolest, most fun 123s that I've ever driven, 77 and 78 230. Great car, very simple, very reliable cars. I mean, I know it's sort of like a 240D with a carburetor almost. So those cars are really just wonderful cars. I also think that it's important to experience the car firsthand. Some people get in a 123 and they're like, I don't like this at all. You just spent $10,000 buying a 240D 10 states away. Car shows up, you drive it, you're like, oh gosh, this is awful. I think especially if you're looking at a lower powered 123, it's very important to know what you're getting into. to learn what the car is usually going to need and how many how many seconds it's going to take you to get to 60 miles an hour. Other little things, like just the experience of driving the car is very important and is a very important defining characteristic of what you want. Some people have approached me saying, I want a 300D turbo, and they ended up liking the way that a 240D with a manual drove, or they liked the weight balance of those cars. Some people who approach me wanting station wagons end up with sedans because they feel that the station wagon is more car than the I'm not going to say the chassis was designed for, but they feel the sedan is more nimble and visibility might be a little bit better from a sedan. I never really cared very much for I never really cared very much for the 77 to 79 Generation 1 cars, although I do like them and feel that they should be preserved as well. But there's some people out there that really think that these are wonderful cars, and they really want to be able to operate ACC2 in their 77 300D and say, oh, this is the purest form of the 123, and that's fine, that's okay. So I'm not totally impractical. Not totally. Now, one of the other topics that I wanted to bring up in today's live stream is the car wizard buying 1983 300D turbo sedan as well as a parts car. And I listened to the video. It was a little difficult for me, but I have some thoughts I'd like to share, especially if you're the car wizard. So first and foremost, I don't think that the silver car that he bought is necessarily a parts car. I get all the normal arguments that typical mechanics make. The car's too expensive to fix up. This car will never be a good drivable car again. This car should never see the light of day again. I think it's really frustrating how mechanics try to come up with these opinions about cars that they don't really understand, including Car Wizard. The 123 is so much better than every other car out there. And it's totally a resurrectable car, especially when it's sort of abandoned and left to die in somebody's field. We see a lot of 123s like this that have been abandoned by the side of the road or in somebody's backyard or at a mechanic shop. And what do? You put a battery in them and they start right up. Car Wizard's approach is to rob a bunch of used parts off of the parts car to put them on his other gold sedan that he bought, which I think is a stupid idea because A, you can buy a lot of new parts for these cars. I mean, I saw him looking at a control arm and ball joint assembly, a lower control arm because the car has a good ball joint pressed into the steering knuckle. I mean, I thought this guy was a mechanic. A ball joint is not that expensive. If I wanted to go to Mercedes and buy a ball joint, it's like, what, $50? If I wanted to go to TRW and buy one, I don't know, sort of between $20 and $30, depending on the site you use. I mean, he should have the press to put these in. He shouldn't be looking at suspension components that wear out and say, oh, maybe I could rob these from a parts car. It's kind of a stupid way to do things. If he really knew what he was doing with this car, I don't think he'd be getting involved with this. I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to the guy, but I wouldn't want him working on a 123 because he doesn't seem to really get it. I mean, he works on everything. One minute he's got like a Chevrolet in an old Cadillac in his shop, and the next minute he has a Lamborghini. And I think that you shouldn't dabble in a bunch of different cars if you're really a dedicated specialist. I think that he's just part of Tyler Hoover's goofy narrative that's designed more for entertainment than real automotive knowledge. And I think that his quote-unquote parts car is actually a really savable car. It needs some cleaning. It's dirty. It's got some cosmetic blemishes. But give me a week and I could take that car and get it running and driving again. I'm sure of it. I look at that car and I'm like, this is a solid car that somebody probably abandoned. I mean, I don't know about the engine, but most of the time, statistically speaking, 617 turbo diesel engines survive without any issues for long periods of time. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are about it, but I do encourage you to blow up his page and tell him that he's wrong and that he needs to seriously reacquaint himself with Mercedes principles. And I actually would like to debate him. So, Car Wizard or Tyler, if you're watching, I'd love to have a live stream, like a debate on YouTube about this sort of thing, because this is an area where I'm extremely knowledgeable about basically taking what is a dead car and bringing it back to life. And that's kind of the one of the perks of the 123. The 123 diesel is the one of the few cars, I mean, all Mercedes diesels, analog Mercedes diesels are some of the few cars that can be left for dead for decades. And then with a minimal amount of work, be woken up and put back on the road. It's just as simple as that. All right, let's look at some comments. You guys are going to see my ceiling fan. I think it's interesting that I'm looking at John Hart. Thanks for your comments here. It's interesting because John mentioned Octaford out of a 123, which is fine. So that John informed me that the Car Wizard's a 123 is a customer car. So I don't know. I think it's frustrating how misleading a YouTuber can be. Basically, I'd say Car Wizard is misleading people, including his customer. Bubba wants to know where to start on his 1983 380 SL. Sat for 15 years, give or take, and it wouldn't start back then. Well, you need to start with the gas tank, the fuel pump, the fuel distributor, and the warm-up regulator. Replace the gas tank, replace the fuel pump, replace the fuel filters, send the warm-up regulator and fuel distributor to CIS Flowtech after you try to get the car running. So once you do the gas tank and the fuel pump, then try to start the car. If the car doesn't fire, then it's time to pull the warm-up regulator and the fuel distributor. You should also check the timing chain. I like doing these. Okay, so Lou told me he had the parts car running. No rust on it except maybe a small hole in the floor. Yeah, exactly what I was thinking. It just makes me so sick that he's like, oh, let's just take this car because it's been sitting outside for a few years and, part it out. Stupid. I mean, they're not making any more good cars. Well, okay, so David told me that he's getting the 123 to be used by the customer's daughter as a first car. Thank goodness they're in Kansas, because one of every 3 vehicles on the road is a tractor. Hopefully the guy's daughter doesn't wreck the car, but it's like, why would he get involved in a project like this? David, thanks for asking about the axles. There's a company called CV Source in Georgia, and CV Source is they do axle rebuilding, and they do a great job rebuilding 123 axles. And I would strongly recommend that you send there. The guy who runs it, his name is John, and that is CV Source, and I think they're in Douglasville, Georgia. Tell John Pierre sent you. All right. 126. Alexander, about your 300 SE, please ask your question again about the car. Curious, for the 123, where can you get a full wiring harness? Okay, Chepo asks, can I ask for a view on my 124? Yes. You can, but you're going to have to email it to, what kind of 124 do you have? Okay, now John, 123, where can you get a full wiring harness? I've never needed a full wiring harness for a 123. They just don't go bad. It's like saying, It's like saying, where can I get a new cow catcher for a steam locomotive? The thing about 123 harnesses, though, is that they are repairable. So I'm going to tell you this. Mercedes sells all of the parts to repair a wiring harness, the heat insulation, the pin bushings, and the plug housings. And of course, you can buy different colors and gauges of wire. So typically, I try to find out where the actual problem is and fix it myself. There are some superfluous harnesses that don't have full integration into the main harness, such as the AC wiring harness and a 240D. I've had to source used harnesses for these, but for the most part, you just repair the harness. I mean, I've run into this situation too, but he doesn't know that Mercedes sells the heat insulation. And actually, what I've learned how to do, John, since you're asking about this, is I've learned that where you have a break in a physical harness, you can actually cut the harness and solder in a plug. You can solder in all of the pin bushings with, if you have, like, let's say you have a 16 wire harness that gets eaten up by rats. You can cut that harness, solder on 16 male pin bushings and 16 female pin bushings, get a 16 pin wiring plug connector, and literally just plug the two back together. And that's what I would have done in that situation. I think that Car Wizard's problem is that because he's not a Mercedes specialist, he doesn't know these things, and I just have such a problem with people pretending like they know things about these cars when they don't. I think that's why it's very important that all of you guys that are watching this channel who work on your own cars start creating your own YouTube channel so we can show people like Car Wizard how the right way to do something is. Okay, Alexander, 1990 300 SE. A few months ago, and would like to know which parts I need to look at or change first. Okay, so 126 isn't necessarily about changing parts. It's about evaluating the car to see where the need is. So how many miles are on the 300 SE? I think that you need to look at front suspension, lower ball joints, upper control arms, guide rod, mounting kits. All of these areas wear out, especially if you have 100,000 miles or more on the chassis. Scott, okay, where would you send a rebuild on an injection pump for a 300 SDL 126? I would send it to Yankee Diesel in Newtown, Connecticut. Tom Horvath, who owns Yankee, is a good friend of mine. He does a great job of these pumps. He's very reasonable. And he's in Newtown, Connecticut, and the name of the business is Yankee Diesel. Okay, so going back to you, Alexander, 80,000 miles. I would probably change the spark plug. So you need an H9 DC Bosch plug in there. I think the Mercedes part number is 003 159 3703. That's the Mercedes plug number for an M103 engine. Of course, I would change, my fluids, especially the coolant. That's one everybody ignores. Now, on a 300 SE, Alexander, I would also change the thermostat out for a thermostat from a 1980, 82 to 85 300D turbo. Yeah, John, we're going to talk about that assessment in a second. We're in a position with the 300 SE where the factory 87-degree thermostat was just too hot. Um, I don't I don't like that extremely hot thermostat. So I use the 80 Celsius unit from a 300D turbo and I drill a small hole in it, a tiny hole just as a bleed hole, or else the engine will overheat when you put it in. Like a hole that's like 3 or 4 millimeters. Um, okay. Chepo Mojave. I have a 124 E220. It's in the shop now to have the wiring harness redone. Yet again, it's turning into a money pit, especially after having redone the gearbox. Well, yeah, the E220 was not that great of a car because it had some wiring harness issues. Personally, I wouldn't do a Lexus V8 conversion because that'll set you back even more money. Uh, the reason the car is turning into a money pit is because the person who's working on it probably doesn't know what they're necessarily doing. But the M111 engine is a very good engine. I don't think that you would have a great experience with the Lexus engine. And the Lexus engines, just so you know, are so complicated. There's so much wiring and so much security. If the guy can't get the car to run, if you can't get the car to run with its factory wiring and electrical system and engine, how the heck is anybody going to get the thing to function with a Lexus engine in it? I mean, just explain this to me. People in Africa are notorious for scamming other people. This is just another scam. Now, John asked about the Mbca survey. John, just to be totally frank, I think the survey was crap, and I think that the National Business Office is trying to control the information they get out of the survey by limiting the number of questions in the survey. I think that the survey needs to be like a 50-question survey, and I think that all members need to be told that they have to take it. It shouldn't be optional, especially because this whole little facade cost the club $40,000. And in fact, I think that you and anybody else who's listening from MBCA should email Harrison Curver and tell them that the survey is crap. I mean, believe it or not, the strategic planning committee of the MBCA basically dictated what was going to go on that survey. All right. John Woods. Good luck looking at the 300 SD. That's all I have to say. Now, Hugh, I have a W111 220SB. The front subframe bushings are torn. Any advice on changing the subframe bushings? Maybe do a video. Yeah, I have a video about this. You should basically take the front sway bar, Hugh. Listen to me carefully. Take the car's front sway bar, unbolt the front sway bar, and then flip the sway bar around so that it becomes a support bar for the front of the engine. Then pull the whole front subframe out, change the sway bar kit, change the front suspension bushings, and change the motor mounts as well as the subframe mounts. If you need additional information, you can email me at mbownersforlife@bellsouth.net. That's mbownersforlife at bellsouth.net, or the same email address at gmail.com. Hugh, do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments. John writes, I wrote a full text response on the MBCA survey end. Yeah, they don't, John, just so you know, they don't read that little commentary box. They don't care about it. It's just there to make you feel better. If they really gave a shit, the commentary box would be much bigger, much, much bigger. It would be like able to accommodate a novel or something. I would actually email Harrison Corver directly. I emailed him with my thoughts. I sent him a small novel. He did respond to it. Basically blew me off, but he did respond. So I don't know. Yeah, but you should, and anybody you know that's in MBCA should. By the way, John, I haven't forgotten about your car. Everything is just so painstakingly slow right now because um, two of my employees feel that they can't return to work yet full time because of risks from Corona. It's just one of those things that I'm trying to deal with one day at a time. um, did anybody else watching take the MBCA survey? I'm really curious. Yeah, John Woods, I know. I can't figure out how to switch my camera. Oh, you sold the 560 SL. Okay, great. Okay, well, good. I'm glad that somebody saw the value in that car. It was an attractive car. At least, at least, was it, what kind of offer was it? I'm curious. Yeah, David, 123. Knock and rumble. It sounds like it's your rear sway bar links. Have you replaced those yet? The rear sway bar links, if they wear out, they can totally chatter. Um, so yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, I've been on now for almost 45 minutes. If any of you have any questions that didn't get answered, you know where to reach me. Um, I appreciate all of you for tuning in. And if any of you have any additional comments for our next live stream, please let me know. So thank you guys for coming. Be sure to blow up the Car Wizards Facebook. I know I'm not Facebook, YouTube page, and tell him that there's no reason to part out a perfectly good 123, especially because I'm so desperately looking for these cars now. Thanks, guys. Bye.